Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.
A controversy over grade switching has disturbed the usually tranquil campus of the College of Southern Idaho in Twin Falls and raised the question of how often grade switching takes place on college campuses. That's our story tonight.
Good evening. For years, the College of Southern Idaho, a junior college in Twin Falls, has been the absolute pride and joy of that Southern Idaho community. The college has enjoyed extensive community support over the years, and in turn it has provided an educational, athletic, and cultural focus for much of the Magic Valley area. But now the college and the community have been dealt what must be called a blow. 2 weeks ago, the Twin Falls Times-News broke the story of a grade-changing incident at CSI. It was news that has stayed in the local headlines ever since. There have been charges of unethical or illegal actions by the college president. A top official of the college has resigned, and the newspaper, which many now blame for sensationalizing the story, has commented editorially about the college letting down the community that has supported it so long and so well. Tonight, producer Bruce Reichert will report on the facts and feelings of the CSI grade-changing story. And later on, I'll be talking with another college registrar, a professor, and a student leader about the business of grade switching.
This is a story about a quiet, attractive community college in Idaho, and about two well-respected men on campus, the college president and the college registrar. And it's a story about how one of these men felt pressured by the other to quit his $30,000 a year job, all because a student wanted an F removed from his report card. This is the building where the school's registrar, John Sims, used to work. He doesn't work here anymore. He resigned when, according to Sims, he was asked to do something illegal and unethical by the college president. Sims, who declined to be interviewed, said that he was asked by the president to change the grade of a former student from an F to an incomplete. That student was the son of former basketball coach Eddie Sutton. The resignation of the school's registrar sparked a flurry of newspaper articles in which Sims charged the president with buckling under to pressure from the former basketball coach and of threatening to withhold teachers' contracts. Sims also charged CSI with a history of unethical grading dating back to the early days of the college when Eddie Sutton was coach and Dr. James Taylor was president. This man is now the college president, the man behind the headlines.
I think at one time in the history of this institution, and I would not only say this institution, probably in many institutions, there was a feeling that if you were an athlete, you probably got preferential treatment. I think those days have been gone for a long time.
On the surface, at least, it looks like you were really willing to go to bat for the coach's son. You let him talk to you about the matter, you met with the counselor and the teacher, and even supposedly threatened to withhold contracts at one point. And you even arranged to have the disputed math course added to the summer schedule so that the student could take the course in the summer. Is this something that you would do for just any student?
Bruce, there's a couple inconsistencies there we'll try to catch on, but first, I guess you'd say that after 16 or 14 years in this campus as a counselor, I have many students and parents of students, past students, who still refer kids to me to get them started in the proper way would be. So it's not unusual at all for me to see students. In this case, we're talking about a person who had, since day one, my experience here, been a close friend, whose son was going to an Eastern prep school, and at the last minute, because of his son's experiences here over the years, he decided to come to CSI. So no, it's not unusual that I spend some time with students, because that happens often. The experience of this would be somewhat different. The counselor and teacher you talked to, my conversation with them was based not on the grade per se, but really of a breakdown in our communication system. Second thing is that I did not put the class in the schedule. The instructor made a comment that he did have 4 or 5 students who wanted to take the class in the summertime, so the class would be available. It's not something that we did at that time. Later, at a period of time when it appeared that we'd better to have a different instructor give the class, then I did ask the dean to see if he couldn't arrange a class, which would be with a different instructor.
What about threatening to withhold contracts?
If you're very aware of the grapeliner on campuses, at a time we had an original conversation I had 3 faculty people call me back very quickly and indicated that there was a question about whether or not that I had in fact tried to interfere with a grade, which I had not. The grade never came up. I never asked for grading. I asked about the system. At a time I called the 2 gentlemen back in, I indicated that I would withhold contracts until I got to the bottom of what seemed to be a problem, that this kind of information had come out of a meeting which was highly professional and we hoped informative. And that took place in about 5 minutes. They told me exactly what had occurred, what had happened, and it was a case of somebody probably overhearing a phone conversation and misinterpreting it.
Eddie Sutton told a reporter that he did not hire a lawyer, he did not threaten you, he did not put pressure on the school to get this grade changed. What do you make of this? Where is the truth in the amount of pressure that was exerted?
Well, I think somewhere in between. I think Eddie was a parent who did feel like his son had been unfairly treated, or at least inconsistently with the facts as presented to other faculty members to his son, and in fact we did verify by a check of our grading policies. However, Eddie did tell me on the phone that he did tend to come to our board meeting with attorney, and the issue would be over the grade, the matter was given, and the inconsistency. So I think there's probably a fine line somewhere between the two, Bruce.
The policy for grade changes and withdrawals is outlined in the college catalog, but in the Sutton case, the normal grade appeals process was not followed.
And I might say
Nevertheless, Meyerhofer contends he did nothing illegal or unethical.
After we'd been through the faculty, those individuals, and the administrative team, then I sat down with our board chairman, Mr. Craig, plus our attorney, Mr. Alexander, and went through all the facts of what had occurred up to that point. They too agreed, faced with these facts, that we probably weren't on firm ground to stand any kind of a court test on this thing or an issue, and therefore it seemed to them it was considerable or reasonable to grant the incomplete. So when Mr. Sims says we've done this, we did it in a line of going through complete procedure, with him the only negative vote in the whole issue.
Meyerhofer suggested that part of his rationale for resigning was that Registrar Sims was upset when a younger, less experienced man was given a job he wanted. Most of the students on campus seem unconcerned about the grade change controversy, and many we talked to knew very little about it. But the controversy has extended beyond the campus to the community. Last week, several Twin Falls residents came out in favor of the former registrar.
He's been with CSI for a long time. Had to resign because of his principles and his ethics. It's just not right.
Debbie Schmeckel spearheaded a 3-day petition drive aimed at ousting the college president. She got involved, she says, after her son questioned her about the grade change.
My son overheard a conversation and asked me about the possibility of getting bad grades in school and having them altered by request if you felt the need to do so. And I told him no, and he said, well, this student did. And I said, but it was wrong. And he said, well, how did he go about getting his grades changed? He said, did his mom and dad have money? This was his question to me as an 11-year-old. At that point, I felt angered. Because,
the petition, signed by over 200 people in the community, were presented to this man last Monday evening, but to no avail.
As a board chairman and as an individual, I couldn't be prouder of an individual than I am of Jerry Meyerhofer.
As president of the CSI board, Leroy Craig is a key player in all this, and there is no question in anyone's mind about whom he is supporting and on whom he puts the blame.
Jerry tried to do the right thing with a very difficult situation. When you've got a father and a son involved and you've got somebody that is unhappy with his job, you have a very explosive situation. And Jerry tried to do the right thing, and because of a media that seems to want to blow this all out of proportion, we have these problems.
Craig also put some of the blame in the lap of the college faculty, whose inconsistent enforcement of the grading policy helped create the problem. 2 weeks ago, the faculty chose these 3 professors to help sort it all out.
We decided as a faculty committee, and I think in our faculty senate in general, that we weren't going to investigate, if you would, and try to live in the past on this thing and recreate old sins and get harder feelings than there already are stirred up. We were going to attempt to make some recommendations whereby we could say this is base point, point one, and we're going to move forward from now on.
I was one of the faculty members that wasn't really aware that the latest change had been in force. I realize it's in the student bulletin, but after all, who reads the student bulletin?
If there is a laxness, it, I don't think, has anything to do with the faculty at large becoming lax, or certainly the administration. In fact, a clear indication here is that the registrar's office was anything but lax where this issue is concerned. They were right on top of it. Individual faculty members, however, and I can indict myself in that case, have from time to time been lax in how they administer those non-credit grades. And that's particularly true where the I and the W are concerned.
If the committee gets its way, students at CSI would never again receive an F or an incomplete or a W on a report card. Instead, they would receive a simple no credit. The CSI faculty is not tenured, nor do they have continuing contracts, a fact which helps explain their guarded response on camera to the question of undue pressure to adjust or change student grades.
Every instructor has to make up his or her own mind about the involvement of administrators or coaches or parents or anyone else in the reporting of how well a student is doing or is not doing. Some faculty might react to a phone call of interest as intimidation. Another may not. So in terms of the president being involved, I think that put him in an unfortunate loop in this whole process, and he, I think, has experienced that somewhat regrettably.
It wasn't the faculty, but the basketball team, first under Coach Eddie Sutton and now under Fred Trinkle, that catapulted CSI to national prominence. In such a setting, it's inevitable that some people might see the grade change of the coach's son as just another example of athletes receiving preferential treatment. But almost no one at CSI believes this incident qualifies, and certainly not the current basketball coach.
I feel very bad that the whole thing happened because Steve Sutton was a member of my basketball team the first semester. He had quit at semester, ironically enough, to concentrate more on his studies. Had he done that, maybe this whole thing wouldn't have come about. I think if everyone knew the whole story and had an unbiased presentation of it, not one that certain news people just picked what they wanted to write for sensationalism and selling papers, I think maybe there would be a different drummer in this story. So I feel very bad it happened. I feel very fortunate that athletics was never mentioned because it shouldn't have been. But
and what about the athletes themselves? Do they think they're getting special treatment?
I guess when you talk CSI, I guess you talk basketball, but no, I guess the basketball team is more recognized, but for special help and that, no, I don't think so.
Well, unfortunately not, you know. I really don't. Well, you know, no, I don't think so. I really feel that everybody's treated fair here, no matter who you are. And even if you do come from 3,000 miles away like me, as long as I'm treated fair, I don't ask for any more, and I don't think anybody else does either.
I think people who judge by their own standards instead of knowing the whole story are the ones that are having problems with this. If you knew the whole story and you knew all the pressures that were involved, I don't think it was a terrible, terrible decision that was made. It was made in the best interest of the college at the particular
Even if the decision to grant a grade change was in the best interests of the college, almost everyone admits that that decision has damaged the reputation of the College of Southern Idaho.
And I hope that they'll forgive and forget because you know, I don't know how many people I've talked to and said, well, so-and-so changed this for me, and so-and-so helped me out when I was in trouble, and this happened to me years ago, and this happened. And, you know, it happens everywhere because we're all human. And I think that was maybe one of the problems with the inconsistency of grade changes and of this type of problem that got the whole story started in the first place. So let's hope it's over. Let's get on with a great year, and this is a great institution, and we'd like to see every Idaho young man and young woman come down here and go to school because we do have a quality education here.
The former registrar at the College of Southern Idaho, John Sims, was offered several chances to be interviewed for this broadcast. He declined. Using now the CSI grade switching story as a takeoff point, we examine how these cases are handled elsewhere at Idaho higher education facilities and how these cases impact on the integrity of any institution. Our first view of that tonight comes from Matt Tellen. He is the registrar and director of admissions at the University of Idaho in Moscow, where he joins us tonight. Mr. Tellen, could this kind of situation happen at the University of Idaho?
This is the first exposure I've had to the documentary on the TV, as explained on the monitor. And first of all, I'd like to make a comment that I personally hold President Meyerhofer and Registrar Jack Sims in the College of CSI in very, very high esteem. I've had an opportunity to work with those folks for the past 16 years, and based on what we've seen here on the screen this afternoon, I'm certainly not in a position to make a comment on the internal matter at hand at CSI. The question, could such a thing happen at the University of Idaho? What I'd like to say is our grading policy is a very firm policy. Our grading policies at the institution, University of Idaho, are approved by the faculty of the university, and I guess the registrar probably has to serve as a watchdog or serve as a conscience of the university to see that the grading policies as approved by the faculty are implemented in the way that they were approved. We do have grade changes. I just did a little statistics before coming over here to kind of give the public an idea of what can happen. The University of Idaho last fall semester, we had over 44,000 grades turned in. As a result of that, we ended up having about 200 grade changes, which, and by my mathematics is right, if my mathematics is right, is less than 0.04%. So grade changing here is very minimal. Registrars probably think they have quite a bit because they actually have to do the recording and the changes, but I think like any other institution, we are pretty well protected by our grading policy. And the main thing about grading policies, they should be scrutinized very, very carefully by the faculty and everybody concerned.
Let me just interrupt for just a second, Mr. Tellen. I think I heard you say that the registrar, though, really has to be the check on this system. He's sort of the conscience of the university.
Yes, he has to be on alert for inconsistencies, or even should be on top of making sure that faculty do not turn grades that are not approved by the faculty. If you have 500 or 600 faculty members, and some of them have taught at other institutions, they may try to turn in grades that they're used to turning in at the other school. We have that happen at this institution, but it's my responsibility to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't accept that grade that doesn't fit with the grading policy as approved by our faculty at our institution.
Right, I hear what you're saying. Let me ask you finally, and then we'll come back. Should a high university or college administrator, say a president, should he ever insert himself into the grading process?
That's kind of a loaded question because policy is different at each school, and I'm not familiar with the protocol.
Well, speak to your own situation.
CSI.
Speak to your own situation.
Okay, at our institution, our governance and policies of the university are under faculty governance, and really the faculty are the ones that have the say. If there are inconsistencies or if a student wants to appeal a grade, then there is an appeal procedure for a student to do that. But basically the grade is between the student and the faculty member. If the student feels he's been treated unfairly, yes, he can take the appeal higher through the various university channels and ultimately to the Board of Regents if he wants to.
Right. Okay.
I cannot recall of a case of that ever happening, however.
We'll come back, sir. Thank you very much. Another view now from another Idaho College campus, Idaho State University in Pocatello. William Gibson is an English professor at ISU and former chairman of the Faculty Senate there. He joins us tonight in Pocatello. How about that question I just put to Mr. Tellen, Professor Gibson? Is it ever proper for a high university administrator, say a president, to insert himself in this process?
I guess I would give a rather dogmatic answer to that question and say no. I don't believe any administrator has a role in deciding upon the grades given to students.
Why not?
The final responsibility for evaluating the performance of students is that of the faculty. The administrators are charged with keeping the operation of the institution going. They are not the people who should be deciding upon grades. It seems to me that if a president has, say, a complaint leveled about a grade, that he's perfectly within his right to have a faculty group look into the justice of the grades awarded. But I can't conceive of a situation in which a university president or vice president should intervene directly and mandate that a grade be changed. That administrator, not having taught the course, not having worked with the student or looked at the student's work in any detail, cannot generally have the competence to decide upon the quality of the performance.
Again, I don't expect any of you gentlemen to be up to speed on what happened at the College of Southern Idaho. You don't work there, and you're obviously not aware of that situation. So speak to your own experience at Idaho State. What kind of pressure is placed on faculty members to do this kind of thing?
We don't see very much direct pressure within the institution. Occasionally I hear reports, one of the teaching assistants in our department will say, well, he had a call from a coach inquiring about this person or that. But generally, we don't have a whole lot of trouble, partly because we try to organize the program here so that people from outside the department don't put the finger directly on the people who are teaching, particularly on the junior members of the faculty, lecturers, teaching assistants, and the like.
Well, let me ask you finally, and then we'll come back. As Bruce Reichert mentioned in his report a moment ago, folks at CSI took great pains to point out that this was not a case of preferential treatment for an athlete. But still the perception persists among the public that athletes sometimes do get preferential treatment. Do they?
I believe they do. And I think probably they expect preferential treatment even if they're not always given it. In my role as director of composition, I frequently have athletes turn up and expect to be allowed into closed classes. I had one turn up the other day after having missed first six meetings of the class, expecting to be allowed to come back into it. We explained to him that essentially he'd fail the course at that point if he were to enter at that time, and his having practiced, I think he was a football player, I can't remember, having practiced football was no excuse for not doing the work required for the course. But somehow I got the idea that he could be far more casual about class attendance and turning into work than other people. But
well, I have to ask you if you've got any pressure to do something different in that case.
Did I?
Yes, sir.
Oh, no. I think probably I'm thought of as a rather unpleasant person, so as a rule they don't call me.
Well, you don't look all that unpleasant, but we'll come back in a moment, sir. Thank you. Finally now, the view of a student leader at Boise State University in Boise. Steve Jackson is the student body president at BSU. Mr. Jackson, what about that question, special treatment for athletes? Are students worried about it?
Not really from what I'm hearing, and I've been here 3 years. I really haven't heard any instances here at BSU.
Are you confident that the system at Boise State University, the grading system, the integrity of that system, is really above question, full of integrity?
Well, as full of integrity as we've heard about, which I guess means that we haven't heard of any instances that go against this situation. We've heard of several complaints where students would like to see something different when they have not received the grade that they would like in a class and have gone through the system, gone through the route to get that grade changed. We've heard complaints then, and those, I might say right now, were not athletes, so the system seems to work.
The system seems to work. I guess that was my next question. If there is a system in place at Boise State that allows for, a legitimate sort of grievance procedure if a student thinks that a grade is not handled properly.
Right.
That system exists and it works. What about this question of the kind of pressure that is sometimes apparently brought on faculty to change grades, be it from a parent or a football coach or whomever?
Again, I'm probably in a tough position to call on that, only because I would be going on hearsay. But as a student and as someone who chose to be involved in something other than academia all of the time, meaning student government, I find myself every once in a while in a position where I have to ask an instructor to maybe say I can miss a class 1 week, or I have to be somewhere for a committee meeting. Can I be 40 minutes late for a lab? And so I've had to be in that position where we're asking faculty to back me up. Most are really good about it. And again, it's hard to say if athletes are getting that treatment right now. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you finally, and then we'll open this up quickly, for a view of whether a college administrator or president should ever insert himself into this process. consider just Boise State's situation.
I'd have to agree with Professor Gibson. I wouldn't want to see the day where President Kaiser would have to be called upon to make a decision determining grades or some such thing in an isolated instance. I don't think that he'd want to be put in that position.
Okay, Mr. Jackson, let me go back to Registrar Tellin in Moscow. One of the things that CSI is doing, apparently, Mr. Tellin, to correct the situation is to, when a student fails a class, to give no credit as opposed to a failing grade. Is that a good idea?
Well, first, I think they're to be commended for reviewing their policy and looking for any inconsistencies. Each institution has to determine its own grading policy, and I had a call from one of the members of their committee yesterday asking input from me what I thought about a no-credit grading system, and I said before they make the final step, they should review a publication put out by the American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers, edited by C. James Kwan, who's a registrar at Washington State University. I think they would find it very helpful in making a final decision in reviewing their policies as applied to maybe changing them to a policy that would be in the best interest of the College of Southern Idaho.
Mr. Gibson, Professor Gibson, how about that from where you sit in Pocatello? Is that a good situation to just not let a student fail, basically?
It seems to me that it calls into question the criteria for evaluation that you use for all of the instruction going on in the institution. If a student, in fact, cannot fail or withdraw failing from a course, you wonder exactly what the absolute standards are by which you judge anything. I'd be very suspicious, I guess, myself about the quality of the programs in an institution in which the lowest grade is a C or a D.
Well, let me get Mr. Jackson's view of that. Is that a good idea to do away with basically failing grades?
Well, strictly personally speaking, I would go for it. It sounds like a good idea. I think it would help in a lot of cases. And as I understand it, Stanford has been doing it this way for some time now. And
why would it help?
Well, I think there are a lot of cases where you find yourself in a position of deciding, perhaps past a deadline, that you really should be withdrawing a particular class, getting out and moving on, and you're forced to maintain. I can think illness has caused a lot of students grief as far as grades go. There are probably 50 good reasons for something like this to be looked at, and I like...
Right. Well, let me just get Professor Gibson real quick on that point.
Almost all institutions have petition processes that allow students to withdraw after deadlines if there's sudden death in the family, extended illness on either part of the student or an immediate member of the family.
Right. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you there, Professor Gibson. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We appreciate you gentlemen joining us tonight, Mr. Gibson in Pocatello, Mr. Tellin in Moscow, and Mr. Jackson in Boise, to help us sort this story out. I'm Mark Johnson. We'll be back tomorrow. Good night.
Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.